Okay, there we go. All right, so everything is streaming. Looks like it's good to go. Hopefully, nothing weird happens in this one that's been happening recently. But let's just jump right into it. My name is Mr. Barden. I do a lot of videos like this for my students, taking a course here. And basically, what I'm going to be going through today, it says it in the thumbnail and the title, but it's going to be using on-screen buttons and sliders in order to control your playback of sounds using the P5 library and the Tone library. So just real quick, I have another set of videos. I usually end up remaking these every year, just in case anything changes or updates, and just to help keep myself up to date on all of the information. So if you enjoy the video or you learn something useful, feel free to give it like, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. And if anything just doesn't make any sense at all, put that down in a comment. I love responding to those whenever they are relevant. So real quick, I'm just going to kind of jump right into this. I've got the Tone library already loaded up into P5, and essentially you just have to take this line of HTML code and replace the one that is linking to the P5 sound library. If you were to go to, there's a link to this page in the description, but the kind of textbook I made for this class here, there's that same line of code that can very easily be copied and used for your sketches. So you can copy that however you want. I recommend making a starting template that already has it, and that will make your life easy. Okay. Another thing, I'm going to be playing back 2 sound files, and I should probably figure out where I have those loaded. Downloads. Here's some. Okay. But I've got another link in the description right here under the additional resources tab of this page. There are in the sound section. Where are we? Samples for projects. You can go in and find a bunch of free samples for you to use. I'm gonna go just back up to here and back into my sketch. So I'm gonna real quickly go through just loading stuff up, getting a basic playback going, and from there. So I'm gonna stick 2 sound files into my sketch. I'm not gonna bother putting them in a folder or anything. I'm just going to upload a file. And I'm going to use you and you, these 2. Oop. Stick them right there. Okay. And now we need the preload function. And this will, again, load up all of the files we want to use before the rest of our sketch does anything. So what I'm going to be doing, let me just close out that extra window there. There is I'm going to start off by making I don't know, sounds. I'll call that sounds. Sounds is going to be a new tone.players object. And there we are. And then once you've made this object, we just have to tell it using JSON notation where to find all of the sounds. So I'll call this one fx : space, and this will be let's see, it's fx_1.mp3. Then I have another one here, and I'll just call this vase, and this will be vase plus hit01.mp3. You want to make sure that this matches up with the names of your files, and if they're in any folders, you include that folder pathway. My next video to come out will be on how you can link to these files online, but I didn't want to include that in here because that'd just be a lot of information in one video. But I've got the sounds right here. The last thing I'm going to do is at the end of this line, I'm just going to say dot to destination for now. This will change in a little while. So I've got this set up. It's going to play a sound when we tell it to, and I've set this up so that way we can hear it. what we're going to do now is make some buttons. So let's say beep and bonk. I'm going to name them that. Why not? So beep is going to be becoming the result of the create button function. And what that argument we're going to need for there is the label that we're going to stick onto this. One moment, though. Echo, stop. I didn't realize my timer was so close to going off. That's what I get for doing these live. But just as a string, this is whatever text you want to have appear on your button. So this will be my fun beep. And then I'll say bonk equals create button. And I'll call this, I don't know, smash. Why not? And if we were to run this, actually, you'll now see these two buttons down here. Now, they won't do anything, but we can make them do something. So what we can do is now that we've made the buttons, we can just refer to them by name. Beep.position is a method. So I'll just say, I don't know, 100, comma, 150. Why not? And then I'll go down here and I'll start with the same. Only I'll change this to bonk. And I'll move this one to be a little to the right. So boom, now they're on this canvas and we can set that up to do something. I do want to point out that, again, a lot of this is here in the textbook. So if you kind of jump into this, creating sounds and kind of scroll towards the bottom, it starts just with some ways that you can set up the playback of sounds in general, how you can map that to different keyboard keys and things like that. Really, all you need is this little bit of code right here. But again, we can use buttons. And we've already used the position method right here, but there's a useful one here, and that is just the mouse pressed method. And all we have to do is say beep dot mouse pressed. Excuse me. And then we give it the name of a callback function, which we haven't made yet. So I'll call this playback one. Sure, why not? And then I'm just going to copy this. This will be very creatively playback two and bonk. So if I just go, I like doing all my new functions kind of at the bottom. You don't necessarily have to, but function playback one and function playback two. And then all this will be is just the playback command for our song. So the name of our player's object is sounds. So sounds.player. And what we specifically need is fx is what I called it. Fx dot start. So again, we have to look at the object that we want, sounds. That's kind of like the album that is containing all of our songs, or the playlist. If you're a person younger than me, you probably listen to playlists more than albums. But we have to tell it the large scale, what to play. So we're going to play the lo-fi hip-hop jams to study to playlist. We're going to find specifically this file within that list, and we're going to start it. So in fact, we could actually copy this, and instead of just fx, we change it to vase. If I refresh my code, nothing has changed on the screen, but we should now hear our sounds. I'm going to click on both of them, so just if you're listening on headphones, I'm not 100% sure how loud this will come through, so this is your warning. All right, 3, 2, 1. There, so you should have heard those. The little light blinked up on my computer, but at the very least, the microphone will have picked up some stuff coming out of my speakers. But now each button has a function that it can achieve, and you can specify whatever you want with your buttons. It doesn't have to be a sound playback. It could be whatever you want it to be. You just have to make the button. All right, so create the button. You have to tell it where you want it to be, otherwise it'll just be off the canvas, so you may not see it. And then you have to tell it what to do when it's pressed. And I do all of these things in that same order every time. So whenever I have a button, you're looking at my code, you can expect to see these 3 lines here pretty much in this order and at that point. You can do a little bit of stuff with styling and things, but I honestly never do. I just kind of leave them the same. So that's the first part, all right? That is, you're just playing a sound back with an on-screen button. The last thing I'm going to meet, and I've got, again, some more code here that's showing this off, but the last thing I'm going to do is doing some things with a slider. And for that, I'm going to pull up an audio effect. I'll get more into this in a dedicated video just for audio effects and the signal pathways. Actually, this graphic is out of date. It's now to destination and destination output, but whatever. Just know that if you look at that, that's a new thing. But a lot of the similar stuff is going to be happening with a slider. So let's do this. Okay, those are the arguments. Okay, so beep bonk, and I'm gonna do a delay, an audio delay. So that's pretty straightforward. In my setup function, I'm just gonna say delay equals new tone.feedback delay, and I'll just make sure I got all those capitals in the right spot. Yep. Boom. I'll say 0.5, comma 0.5. And I'm going to move this to the speakers dot to destination. So the thing with audio is that you have to connect things, all up in the right order. And in fact, this may actually give me some issues. So what I'm going to do is move this actually to up here, and basically make the delay before the sound objects. Because instead of sending this to the destination, I'm going to say we're going to connect to the delay object. So now the sound, instead of it just being played, is going to go from the player to the delay, then to the speakers. If I were to refresh this and play it, 3, 2, 1, and then I'll do the smash. You should now notice it's kind of going ba, 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 bye. So now that is the effect of this delay bit, and we'll get way more into detail with that in a future video. Don't worry if you're not exactly sure what this is doing. We'll get to that. Just know that we are sending the output of the sounds object into the input of the delay, and then the output of that is going to the destination like we were doing before. So now, and again, I have this code right here that I'm kind of using as a basis for this. Don't necessarily have to, but it could be very useful for you. But basically, all we're going to do is make a slider, same kind of stuff right there, and refer to some aspects of that. So I'm going to make a slider. Whoop. And last but not least, I'll just call this delay slider. All right. I say slider or slide? Slide. Equals create slider. And then this gets a few arguments right here that I'm just going to pull up just to be safe. So basically, you'll notice that there are 4 arguments right here. And they control a few things. That's essentially the minimum, the maximum, the default value, and then the the step size, essentially. Um, do I mention that in this page? Actually, I'm not seeing it. There we go. It was just weirdly down below. But anyways, once you make the slider, you just need the minimum and maximum for default. The starting value you don't need, otherwise it just starts at 0. And then the step size is essentially along your slider. How much is a step? So do you want to increment it in bits of 5 or 24 or whatever you might need? If you leave it at 0, it's going to just move freely. And that's what I'm going to be doing here. So we want 0, 1 will be the maximum, 1 will be the default, 0. It'll depend on your effect whether or not you want this number to change. And again, we'll get into that as we go. Okay, so I've got my slider. We can say del slide dot position equals actually that should be a method. And 250. Why not? So I'll stick that, boom, right there. And here is this slider as it has appeared. I'm going to make this a little bit darker so we can tell that apart. There we go. Now everything's nice and clear. So we have that right there. But you're going to notice one thing if you haven't already, and that is that the buttons have a label. They have to, essentially. The slider does not have a label. So what I do is I go into my draw function and I just add a text label. So this will be the delay wet / dry. So let's start there. All right, so that's not quite low enough. So let's say I'll just do this manually at 225. 240. That'll work for now. But basically, you have to add in a label, and I'm going to highly recommend that you do that because if you start adding 5 or 6 of these, you won't know which one is which. So I kind of one at a time get my slider, put it where I want it, put the label, and then once they're all made, then you can go back into your code and connect A to B to C to whatever. All right, so I've got that right there. The last thing we need to do is start adding some stuff into our slider. Make it so that one thing controls another. And again, I'm kind of going through a lot of this, and here's some more code here to illustrate that. But basically, what I'm going to be doing, if you wanted to find it in the exact same code, was on this audio effects page is this first one right here. And that is creating kind of the wet, dry mix. My name is a little better in this code than it is on this one I'm doing right here. But it's the slider for the delay. It's not that complicated. I think everyone is following me. So what we have to do, all right, is go in and say in our draw function, this is very important. We have to check this every frame. So this is why we're doing this in the draw function. We have to talk to our object and then the parameter of it. Again, I'm going to have a whole dedicated video so you can find all of the parameters for your effects, but you can look more into effects like reverb and delay and things like that down here if you really want to. But anyways, and then the value of that is going to equal the value of the wet mix or the slider. So basically what I can do is I can go in and say delay dot wet dot value equals delay slide dot value. So this is going to be a method that is just going to say what is the current value of this. Is it a 1? Is it 0? Is it more or less? In fact, if we wanted to, I could go in and in fact just say, just so we can see this, let wet wet amount. There we go. Equal delay slide dot value as well, and capital S, and then we can say text, but instead of that, we can go in and say bracket, and we can say whatever's inside of there, percent. Yeah, sure. Actually, I'll say that do times 100. Ooh, something got mad at me. Delay slide. Oh, it's del slide. Boop, there we go. And let's just make this 260. 280. There we are. So now 100%, like we can bring this back down, and I'm gonna make life a little bit easier. Which is 0, 100. There we go. All right, so now it's just a number. So now if we run this right now, I'm just gonna refresh it. We're gonna hear our echoing beep and our echoing smash. But if I turn this down, let's say it like 50 or 36, you might notice it's a bit less if I go again. Nothing, no percent, we don't hear this at all. If I start pulling it up a bit, you're gonna notice it's there. It's a little bit quieter until we start getting to, more and more. If I turn it up, if I click it, nothing. It comes back. It's so you can control the amount of the delay, essentially. Again, I'm not gonna go too in depth into effects right now. Again, if you want to learn more about that, follow the links in the textbook to here. What I wanted to show was that you can make buttons and sliders and have them do whatever. In the case of buttons, to kind of wrap this up, you have to make the button and give it a label to start with. This could be whatever you want, but this is what's going to be displayed on the button, and it's also what's going to dictate the width of the button. You notice that fun beep is a little bit longer than smash, so that could be important there if you have to play around with sizes. You have to give them a position if you want it on the canvas. Otherwise, it's just going to appear below the canvas, which may not be a bad thing, but if you're wanting to display your canvas and have people interact with it, you need to put them on the screen. And then specify what happens when the mouse presses it, when you click on the button. And to do that, you're just making a callback function. And these are going to be really simple, which is just right here. In the case of this playback, it was just play this one sound. There you go. For a slider, you have to make the slider, and you have to tell it, what, the parameters of it, give it a position. You have to give it a separate value or a separate line of code for the text portion to give it a label. So don't forget that. And you essentially just have to go into whatever you want to control. In this case, I'm using properties of the delay object, or the feedback delay if I wanted to get specific. But this could essentially be any variable you can control right here. So if I wanted to, make another variable and display it and change it, I could do that with the slider. You just have to set it to the slider dot value method. Again, I'll break this down a little bit more in a separate video. But then now I also just added this into text here so you can see how this changes as opposed to just hearing it. But again, you can use this for whatever you want. It doesn't have to be sound playback, which is why I didn't really go too much into it. But this is where I'm going to end off the video today. Hopefully this was helpful. I'll add a few comments just to kind of explain what everything is right here. But again, if you learned something or you enjoyed it, feel free to give a like, subscribe, comment, all the blah, blah, blah YouTube stuff. It does help out. I do appreciate it. And I'm going to end it right here. There's my button. All right. Everyone have a great day, and I'll see you all the next